What is your secret that you can't tell anyone because it will probably ruin your life? Story 1. 5 years before my stepdad passed away from Alzheimer's and leukemia, I noticed he was unusually quiet in the evenings when I visited him and my mom. One evening I asked him, "Why don't you talk a bit more?" He replied, "If I don't say anything, I can't say anything wrong." At the time, I thought he was trying to avoid conflicts with my mom. I reassured him, saying, "I'd want to hear anything you have to say." After he paid, I realized the deeper meaning behind his words. I remembered being at a lunch with them when he tried to ask me something. He substituted the correct nouns with completely nonsensical ones. Each time he did this, my mom would laugh and say, "Ha ha ha, now you've totally gotten things weird." She wasn't aware she was being condescending. None of us knew he was developing advanced dementia. She assumed his mistakes were simply silly errors and brushed them off. What she didn't realize was how deeply it shamed him. It made him so self-conscious that he stopped talking, doubting his own words and even his sense of balance. I will never explain this to my mom, not even if I'm furious. Telling her would cause irreparable damage to our relationship. She mourned him deeply, and I wouldn't take that away from her. Story 2. About 11 years ago, I reached out to my estranged father. We had become estranged because he had abused my older sister when we were children. We exchanged a few emails during which I lied, claiming I was attending university and needed help with tuition and expenses. Over the course of 3 years, he sent me about £50,000. Eventually, he discovered the lie when he contacted the university I claimed to attend, requesting a receipt for tax purposes. Once he found out, I blocked him and never spoke to him again. That £50,000 was a lifeline for my family. I distributed it among myself, my siblings, and my mom during a period of severe financial difficulty. I told them I had won big in an online casino to explain the sudden windfall. I don't feel any guilt, though I'm not sure my family would understand if they knew the truth. My father had never paid child support after divorcing my mother 12 years before I contacted him, so I felt justified in scamming him. My wife knows the full story and has agreed to keep my secret. Edit. For additional context, my parents divorced when I was 8. I found out about my father's abuse of my sister when I was 17. Between the ages of 17 and 20, I cut off all contact with him. I began scamming him at 20 and stopped at 24, shortly after he uncovered the lie. That £50,000 lifted us out of poverty, giving my mom the breathing room to find a better job and move us to a nicer area. My sister, who has attempted to take her life countless times because of the trauma he inflicted on her, received private therapy funded by that money. It saved her life when the NHS failed her. My father's brothers, despite knowing what he did, sided with him. He fled to New Zealand in 2007, 2 years before we learned about his abuse. Sometimes I check his new wife's Facebook profile and see that he's living comfortably. He doesn't seem to miss the £50,000. I did what I had to do to help my family, and I have no regrets. Story 3. Not life-ruining anymore, but it could have been before I turned my life around, and absolutely before the statute of limitations ran out. While my friends and family don't know the specifics, they all know I was involved in some serious things at a young age. Even my clients are aware of my troubled past. Still, I want to share my story. There are people I know who have spent over 30 years in prison to keep me from being locked up or even charged with a crime. I was homeless from the ages of 12 to 17 and sold weed to survive. However, we kept getting robbed and jumped. So to protect myself, I got involved with what would have been considered a gang in a larger city. While I stuck to weed dealing, the people around me were real gangsters from real cities, doing very real gangster things. 2 of my close friends did 30 years combined for a crime I wasn't even involved in, but the evidence the police had could have implicated me as well. I was just a child, and they took plea bargains they shouldn't have to say it was only the 2 of them. One served 10 years, the other served 20 years. Thanks to mandatory minimums, they had to serve every single day. Another incident involved a crime I was absolutely a part of. 2 women we knew were being held captive by a group of coked-out men. The men had physically restrained them, ripped the phone out of the wall when they tried to call for help, and were talking about gang raping them. When they managed to contact me, we acted immediately. We saved them, but the situation escalated and violence erupted. Nobody was killed, and the women were physically unharmed, but the trauma left its mark. 2 different friends, unrelated to the first incident, collectively served almost 10 years in prison for their roles in what happened. Once again, they never mentioned my name. The statute of limitations has since expired, and this all happened when I was a minor. The women we rescued were safe because we acted quickly and were willing to do whatever it took, including breaking in and resorting to extreme violence. Some people say they have the best friends in the world, but I can prove it. These friends sacrificed their freedom to protect me, even when they didn't have to. And while I've turned my life around, their loyalty will always be something I carry with me. Story 4. I had an affair with a colleague, which ended just 2 days ago. He's 24, almost a decade younger than me, and 20 years younger than my husband. We don't even speak the same language, so most of our communication was through awkward translations on our phones. It wasn't something I intended to happen. We flirted a lot at work, which started off as harmless fun, growling at each other playfully and even tickling each other. My husband knew about the flirting and was okay with it, but one day it escalated. After a shift, we kissed, and 2 minutes later, I found myself doing something I never thought I would. I was in shock the entire weekend, trying to process what had just happened. I had betrayed my husband with a young guy I could barely communicate with. A few days later, I went to his place to talk it out. I genuinely needed to address what had happened so I could work with him again without tension. But of course, we didn't just talk. We ended up being intimate again, but promised it wouldn't happen anymore. That evening, I didn't want to leave. Being held by someone was something I hadn't experienced in so long. For him, too, it was something he had been missing. He hadn't been with anyone in 3 years and had no one else in this country. We bonded over loneliness but agreed that it had to stop immediately. Just one night and never again. I went through a grieving process after that. I decided to lock the memory away and never revisit it. It wouldn't happen again. He had 2 weeks off work, which gave us both time to process. When he returned, the flirting was gone, and we went back to normal, though it was awkward, as expected. 2 months later, I cracked. I developed feelings for him and felt starved of intimacy. I went to his place again. Then just this past Sunday, he messaged me to come over. Afterward, I asked him how he felt about being with a married woman. He said he didn't see a problem with it. We're both lonely and have need, he told me. So what's the issue? I told him I enjoyed spending time with him but felt overwhelmed with guilt. If my husband found out, it would ruin our marriage. That's when he said it was best for us not to continue. He ended it. I've been crying ever since, but deep down I know it's for the best. I don't even have the right to be upset. I committed the ultimate betrayal. I let my emotions and my longing for intimacy cloud my judgment. My husband and I hadn't been intimate for the entirety of 2022, and I was desperate for connection. So was my colleague. This is something I will carry with me, knowing I've damaged the foundation of my marriage. Story 5. When I was a child, our neighbors were my mom's best friend Lynn and her family. Lynn's daughter Stacy was my best friend, and our families were inseparable. We did everything together: camping, scouting, and simply navigating life side by side. In our late teens and early 20s, Lynn fell gravely ill with a sudden infection that left her hospitalized for weeks. Her condition was critical, and we all stayed at the hospital around the clock, praying for her recovery. One afternoon, my mom went home to grab something. Coincidentally, Lynn's husband went home at the same time. While at our house, he confessed to my mother that he had always been in love with her and then made a PIA at her. My mom was completely shaken and fled the house, upset and angry. When Lynn finally recovered and returned home, my mom found it impossible to face her. She said she couldn't lie to her, even by omission. My dad, who knew what happened, refused to speak to Lynn's husband ever again, claiming he would hurt him if he had to hear him talk. From that point on, everything between our families was strained and awkward. Lynn often questioned me about the sudden rift, asking why my parents were upset and distant. Their once strong friendship never recovered. A few years later, both Lynn and her husband were diagnosed with cancer and tragically passed away within the same year. It's been 12 years since their deaths, but Stacy still occasionally asks me what happened between our parents. I always brush it off, saying my parents were unreasonable and chose to end the friendship. I would rather Stacy think poorly of my parents than resent her own. Now, with everyone involved gone, I feel terrible knowing the truth will likely never come to light. Story 6. A couple of years ago, after my girlfriend left me, I started using dating apps for the first time. I'm not unattractive, but I'm not super good looking either, so I ended up with about 5 to 8 matches during that time. One of the girls I matched with, let's call her Lee, messaged me first, complimenting my appearance. It caught me off guard because generally I was used to initiating conversations. We chatted for a few days before deciding to meet up. She asked me to park down the street from her house because her parents were strict and she didn't want to deal with their reactions. I didn't think much of it since I'd been in a relationship before where strict parents were also a factor. We hung out for a few hours and at the end of it, she offered to give me head. I drove her home afterward, and later she texted me to say her parents had called the cops on her for going out. While it sounded extreme, it didn't set off any alarm bells because of my previous experience with controlling parents. We continued talking for about 3 weeks. Lee told me she was training to be a veterinarian and had already spent a year interning. She even planned a date to a boba place where she worked and considered visiting me, despite the 3-hour distance, but decided against it because of bad weather. I told her I wasn't ready for a committed relationship due to my recent breakup, but that we could stay friends and maybe consider a relationship down the line. A week later, while I was at a friend's house watching a UFC event, I received text from an unknown number. It was Lee's mother. She revealed that Lee had just turned 15 less than 30 days ago and said she was going to contact the police. I was stunned. Lee had told me she was 18, even saying she had just turned 18 recently. I immediately called her mom. During the conversation, she mentioned that I was the 4th or 5th adult man she'd spoken to that month about Lee, and that this was an ongoing issue. I was horrified. I had no idea she was underage, as we met on a dating app meant for adults. The situation was a nightmare I never saw coming. Story 7. I have been struggling with severe mental health issues for the last 5 years. I'm 22 now, and have hidden it from everyone I know. I'm not sure if it's because I didn't want to burden anyone, or because I felt I needed to handle it myself to grow as a person. It started in college. I was bullied and betrayed by my closest friends, and in the same month, also bullied by a lecturer who repeatedly poor-shamed me. That broke me. I dropped out and spiraled into a 2-year cycle where I lost the person I used to be. Before all this, I was one of the smartest people in my life. I read complicated books, studied science and computers for fun, and was a go-getter, as my grandpa would say. I once studied photography and Photoshop on a whim for 3 months, earned a national award, and even worked for a race course. I'm not trying to brag, but I want to explain how I used to obsessively pursue goals and succeed at them. Then suddenly, I couldn't keep anything going for more than a week before giving up. I couldn't even read anymore because there were voices screaming in my head 24/7. Reading a single sentence took multiple attempts, as it felt like 20 voices echoing the words in my head, all out of sync and with reverb. Closing my eyes to imagine something, a task that used to come naturally to me, was unbearable. Instead of the clear, detailed images I used to conjure, I would see random noise, demons, Sewell imagery, and glimpses of what I wanted to see, but it would all dissolve back into chaos. I also hid my social isolation from my family. I had no friends and hadn't had meaningful social contact for 2 years. The loneliness was suffocating. My girlfriend was the only reason I wasn't suicidal. Every time I was on the edge, she pulled me back just by being herself. I was filled with regret about my future. I have a strong aptitude for computers, but didn't know how to turn that into a career or advance my skills. I wasted 3 years procrastinating and being a NEET. The only bright spot was the endless time for gaming, since I've always been a pay-in-it gamer. Now in 2023, I'm finally on the mend. I feel more mentally stable, and the voices are mostly gone. The self-doubt and self-hatred are still there. But I've learned to tell myself to shut up and push forward if I think something will help. A turning point came when my partner randomly bought me an omnibus of Batman comics. It was a small gesture, but it reignited my confidence in reading. I've worked my way back to being able to read complex literature. For example, the other day, I read a story about an old English scientist who invents a robot capable of life. Written at the dawn of the machine age, it explored the idea that we consider living things like flowers to be alive because they respond to external stimuli. Yet we don't view ice particles, which also dynamically respond and form endlessly unique structures, as alive. It asked whether we're ignoring the possibility that machines, at a cellular level, might also be alive. For the first time in 2 years, I read and comprehended something complex with a clear mind. No noise, no flashing images, no voices. It almost brought me to tears. Now, I'm preparing to move to a new city with my partner. At first, the idea triggered a Maeve panic attack, but I've come to see it as a necessary step for my recovery. I've also reconnected with some of my oldest friends, which has helped me overcome my severe social anxiety. I'm hopeful but scared. This move feels like a turning point, where I could either break completely or become the person I want to be, depending on countless variables. I'm trying to take it one step at a time and focus on the positives. Story 8. I'm using this account as a secret one because I don't want anyone in my small circle to know what I'm going through. No one seems to care, and if they did, I'd just end up being judged and destroyed for it. I borrowed money, about 600 euros, from a fast loan firm when I was broke, and now I can't pay it back because I've been giving all my money to my boyfriend for our apartment renovation. He despises people who take out loans, so I've been keeping it a secret. If my mom finds out, she'd probably have a stroke, so that's not an option either. I don't know what to do. I guess I'll just wait for the loan company to sue me because I can't think of a good enough lie to explain why there's suddenly money missing from my account. I'm broke, stressed, and feel completely trapped. On top of that, I broke into my boyfriend's phone and found a message from a year ago where he told his friend he's still in love with a former friend of his. She's married now, has kids, and doesn't even want to talk to him anymore. In the message, he said he misses her because she's just his type, hot, crazy, and fun. Yet he's told me that he doesn't want hot and crazy because those women are trouble and that he adores me because I'm nerdy. I guess I was right to feel suspicious. He just settled for me because I look good in front of his parents. But deep down, he's still hung up on her. I feel like I deserve all of this. I'm not hiding an entire person from my past that I still think about and wish I were with. But here I am keeping secrets about loans and money. It feels like I'm drowning in my own life. Story 9. When I was 17, I'm 27 now, I lied about having cancer. I was deeply insecure and convinced myself that I needed a tragic story to seem interesting to my friends. It didn't take long for the weight of the lie to crush me. I felt sick to my stomach constantly, trying to keep it contained and play it off as a small, hidden secret. I started downplaying it until I eventually recovered and said I was fine, hoping it would all go away. But before that could happen, one of my friends, out of genuine concern, told my sister about it. That's how my family found out I was lying. It was humiliating and painful, and I realized just how awful and serious my actions were. To this day, I feel a deep shame about what I did. It's the worst thing I've ever done, and I'll never do anything like it again. I now consider myself a well-adjusted person who doesn't lie anymore, but sometimes I get overwhelmed with guilt. The person who lied about cancer feels like a stranger to me now, and yet I can't escape the shadow of that past. I'm still friends with a couple of the people I lied to, and while I want to tell them the truth, I'm terrified it would ruin our friendships, and maybe it should. But every time I interact with them, the lie sits in the back of my mind, gnawing at me. I've built a good life now, with many other friends and a sense of stability, but the fact that I did something so unethical and strange still haunts me. It's a part of my history I wish I could erase, but I know I can't. Story 10. The mother of my son lied to me 10 years ago to protect me from her mother, who was threatening to take me to court. Her lie broke me, but I thought if she didn't love me, the best thing I could do was leave. I didn't want her to worry about me fighting for custody of our child. I wanted her to find someone she truly loved, someone who would love our child as their own. In late 2016, I received a letter from a lawyer slandering me to build a case for someone else to adopt my son. I could have shown up to contest it, but I didn't. I thought it was for the best. He'd have a stable home, a family who loved him, and no back-and-forth custody arrangements, no lies about a father he didn't know. A week later, I met my wife. In 2018, the mother of my son messaged me for the first time in years. She told me there was doubt about whether my son was mine and apologized. She let me send him gifts for his birthday and Christmas, but I couldn't see him because he was too young to understand. She said it would only confuse him, and I agreed, sadly. Last year, my son asked her why he didn't have a father. She told him the truth and asked if he wanted to meet me. He said yes, and we did. I had pictured our reunion in so many ways. Him running into my arms or me hugging him. But I forgot that I was just a stranger to him. He held his mom's hand and shyly said, "Hi." Even so, it didn't take long for him to open up to me. By the end of that day, he thought I was the funniest person he'd ever met. As I pushed him on the swing, he looked at me and said, "I'm your son, my name." Meeting him was incredible, but I was nervous about seeing her again. The last words I ever said to her on the phone were, "I'll always love you." I was scared because I knew those words were still true. And they were. I learned the full truth that day. She had lied to protect me and had never stopped loving me. For nearly 10 years, she had wished she'd reached out. As we both drove away from that perfect day, I screamed to myself, "It could have worked," over and over. Now, my son doesn't call me dad. He uses my name and wishes I were his dad, as the man he calls dad doesn't understand him and fights with his mom constantly. Her marriage has never been good. My marriage on the surface is strong. I love my wife, and she's been nothing but supportive. But I never wanted more kids because I couldn't imagine having another child when I already had one I never knew. The truth is, I love my son's mother more than anyone in my life. I want my family back, but she has another son with her husband, and I can't bring myself to do to that boy and his father what was done to me. I cry every night and have for the past 10 months. Every other week, I get to see my son, and those moments give me a sense of purpose I've never felt anywhere else. But then I watch him and his mom drive away, and I break all over again. My wife wants children. We've moved into her parents' basement to save money for a bigger house. We're preparing for a future I don't even know if I want. Meanwhile, my son's mom and I both want more kids, but only with each other. It feels like it's too late. Sooner or later, she'll get pregnant again with her husband, and I won't see her for months, or maybe even years. I'm tired. I feel trapped, knowing that if I try to get my family back, I'll destroy the lives of everyone involved. But no matter what I do, someone will get hurt. Probably everyone. Thank you for letting me vent. I hope this gets buried, but even if someone I know reads it, I just needed a place to say all this. Story 11. Apologies for the length, but here's the story. Back in 1970, when I was a kid, I actually came up with the new math. Yes, that new math. It was based entirely on how I thought about and solved problems. I figured it out when I was really young. By second grade, I had it down, but no one would listen to me until fifth grade, when my math teacher, a former collegiate mathematician working as an elementary school teacher, realized what I had discovered. I hated the old way of doing math. It felt stupid and inefficient, so one day I revolted. I refused to show any work on my assignments or tests, just the answers, which was a cardinal sin. After a few days, my teacher kept me after class and asked me to explain my method. When I did, it was like a light bulb went off for her. A few days later, she gave me a worksheet of problems and asked me to solve them using my method, showing every step. The problems she chose happened to prove various mathematical laws. She asked if she could keep the worksheet, and I didn't care, so she sent it to a university listed in the back of the math book. A month before the school year ended, she called me to her desk. I thought I was in trouble, but instead, she showed me the new math book the university sent back. She told me, "This is the brand new math book everyone will be using next year, and it's based on your work." She even had a framed copy of my worksheet hanging next to her desk. The next year, I had her as a teacher again. One day, another student noticed I wasn't showing my work and complained. She asked if she could tell the CLA about my role in the new math, and I said she could. After that, the bullying began. My classmates blamed me for having to relearn math in sixth grade. Years later, I came up with another new method that they teach now. I didn't tell anyone this time because of how I was treated before. Someone else eventually discovered it about 20 years later, and I felt no guilt. People resist change, even when it's for the better. Now I hate the world for how it reacts to innovation. I quit school early in my senior year, joined the military to escape, and never looked back. Story 12. When I was a kid, my mom used to pay the parents of kids in my KLA to look after me before school because she went to work too early to take me herself. None of these kids were my friends. We were just forced to spend time together. One of them, though, picked on me a lot. I wasn't that weird, but I was from another country and didn't really know how to act around potential friends. This girl would copy things I did, like practicing martial arts or playing Minecraft, and then tell me not to tell anyone that I had shown her those things. I really disliked her, but she was more popular, better looking, and cooler than me, so I stayed quiet. The only thing that made me feel better was knowing that she was a bit of a fraud. At least I knew she wasn't as perfect as everyone thought. Her parents had a terrible marriage, and one day I caught my mom hooking up with her dad. After that, every time this girl picked on me, I wanted to throw it in her face. Not to be truthful, but just to hurt her feelings. As I got older, though, I realized that saying something would do more than hurt her. It would destroy her family and probably her entire life. So I kept the secret. It turns out my mom slept with more than one of my friends' dads. One of my other friends caught them too and was really upset. Thankfully, she blamed her dad, so our friendship survived. Still, the whole experience messed me up. Even now, I feel like it's something I've never fully processed. Story 13. Everyone I know believes I have multiple qualifications, a wealth of professional experience, and countless stories from my adventures around the world. I use these fabricated exploits to tell amusing anecdotes about my life, but the truth is, most of it is completely made up. In reality, I've never held a job for more than a year, barely scraped through my degree, and until my 30s, the furthest I had traveled from my birthplace was to a neighboring country a 2-hour flight away. I've lied so much that I can't introduce my family to any of my friends. My family knows the real me, and if they ever met my friends, the tangled web of my lies would completely unravel. I often wake up from panicked dreams where I've died, and everyone is at my funeral, sharing stories about me, only to realize that most of my life was fictitious and that I was nothing but a fraud who lived to entertain others. The strangest part is that my lies have driven me to actually pursue the things I've claimed to have done. I've enrolled in class, taken degrees, started hobbies, and visited destinations, all to understand these subjects better so I could keep up the charade. Ironically, I've now actually done many of the things I once lied about, but in the wrong order. Living like this is exhausting. I spend most of my time wishing I could go back and start over, but instead I feel trapped in an endless cycle of lies. Even writing this terrifies me because I fear someone I know might read it and figure out it's about me. Story 14. I'm young but hold a leadership position at a factory with great pay and benefits, the kind I couldn't get anywhere else. But I hate the work now, even though I'm good at it. I've always struggled with depression, but this is the first time I've seriously contemplated ending my life. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I could do it without hurting my family, but I can't. I hate my personality and, honestly, myself. Everything I do feels fake. I'm horrible in social situations and struggle to maintain relationships. I suspect I might be high-functioning autistic or have something like schizophrenia, though I've never been diagnosed. On top of that, I have a strange fetish that I think has diminished my interest in regular S. It's something physically impossible in real life, and I could never admit it to anyone. Right now, I'm in an online relationship with a femboy. If you had asked me 2 years ago, I would have confidently said I was 100% straight, but that has changed. He's incredible in every way, and I couldn't ask for a better partner. I'd marry him and spend the rest of my life with him if I could. But circumstances, ones I won't detail, make it impossible for us to continue our relationship in real life. There's a time limit on our relationship, and that time is almost up. We've both known this from the beginning, and I've repeatedly lied, telling him I'll be fine and not to worry. But the truth is, it keeps me up at night. I think about it constantly, and I don't know what I'm going to do when it ends. Story 15. This won't ruin my life because the statute of limitations is long past. A very good female friend of mine was nearly date raped by a guy. When she fought him off, he threw her out of his car in the middle of nowhere during winter, while she was underdressed for the cold. She walked several miles to find a phone and call for help. I told her to file a police report, but she was terrified of him and refused. At first, I was ready to find him and beat him into a pulp, but after cooling off, I decided on something far worse. I had read the George Hayduke books and owned them all. Inspired by them, I plotted a long-term revenge plan. Back in the mid-'80s, before computers and security cameras were everywhere, it was much easier to pull off stunts like this. What I did to him wasn't even half of what I was capable of. I spent months researching him and learning his habits. Through mutual acquaintances, I got his phone number and address, which led to a wealth of information. While he was at work, I accessed his mailbox. I steamed open his bills and letters, copied the contents, resealed them, and put them back. Over time, I gathered his social security number, bank account details, and credit card information. Using his information, I had his utilities canceled, electricity, phone, cable, and upgraded his services to the most expensive packages when I wasn't canceling them. I ordered bizarre items from catalogs and had them shipped to his house, some using his credit cards. I subscribed him to dozens of magazines, including the most inappropriate ones I could find. I got him fired from 2 jobs by sending S-Toys and gay porn magazines under his name to his workplace. I also called his boss, pretending to be his jilted gay lover, ranting about what a cheating bastard he was. When he moved back in with his parents, I repeated the same trick with them, making their lives miserable too. For added chaos, I redirected his mail through the post office, so he stopped receiving important letters. I applied for credit cards and store accounts in his name, putting him on every mailing list I could find, especially the weird and inappropriate ones. I didn't stop there. I targeted his car, which had a magnetic key container under the bumper. I copied the keys and returned the original. Over months, I drained his car battery, removed and swapped his license plates, and sabotaged his tires with slow leaks. I poured liquefied fish paste into the air vents and smeared Limburger cheese on the exhaust manifold. I even poured silicon carbide into the engine, ensuring its failure. One of my favorite pranks was applying thread lock to the wheel lugs, tightening them, and then rounding off the lug nuts to make them impossible to remove. I didn't slash his tires or damage the paint, just made his life a logistical nightmare. Word got back to me from mutual acquaintances that he was losing his mind. He got into fights with friends, accusing them of sabotaging him, and eventually lost most of his social circle. After 2 years of this torment, he moved out of state to the West Coast. My friend had her suspicions as the stories of his suffering piled up. Her brother, who was also a close friend of mine, outright guessed it was me. He knew how protective I was and what a devious planner I could be. I denied everything, telling him I would have just beaten the guy up if I were involved. To my friend and her brother, if by some improbable chance you're reading this more than 30 years later, you were right. Kevin, you knew me too well. Story 16. I was in an abusive relationship for 1.5 years, and I hid every bit of it from my parents. He physically beat me, mentally abused me, and stole a lot of money from me. To this day, my parents have no idea. My mom was paying for my apartment at the time, and he moved in, claiming he needed a place to stay while searching for his own lease. But as time passed, he never left. Every time I asked him about moving out, he always had an excuse about still looking. As the abuse got worse, I knew I had to kick him out. I called the police, but they couldn't remove him because, by then, he was considered a legal resident. I had no idea that letting someone stay with you for a certain amount of time could give them tenant rights, even if they weren't on the lease. I was stuck. The only way to remove him was to get an order of protection, but that meant going to court against him. At the time, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was too attached, too in love, and too scared. I started secretly taking videos and pictures to collect evidence, knowing that one day I'd find the strength to leave him. Meanwhile, he stole my mom's credit card, and I covered for him, pretending I lost it. When I was completely broke, I blamed my financial situation on poor decisions, though it was really because of him. When my parents came to visit, I told him he had to leave. I prayed he wouldn't show up, and to my surprise, he didn't. I hid all his belongings so my parents wouldn't suspect anything. Once, they noticed bruises on me, but I lied and blamed it on being drunk and falling. Eventually, I called the police and had him arrested. Afterward, I got back together with him. Then I had him arrested again. He broke into my house, held a knife to my neck, and that was the final straw. I got an order of protection and cut him off completely. I haven't spoken to him since. After he was arrested, I fell into a deep depression. I went through all of this alone because I couldn't bear to tell my mom. I knew she'd lose her mind, scream at me, and make me feel even worse. She doesn't even know he existed. She also thinks I road tripped across the country by myself, though I actually did it with him. Despite everything, I've come out stronger. I'm thriving now, and for the first time in a long while, I feel free. Story 17. Everyone thinks I'm cleared of my non-Hodgkin's lymphoma scare at the hospital, but the truth is I never got a definitive answer. After a biopsy was done on a hard, enlarged lump in my throat, the medical staff went completely radio silent, leaving me in limbo. It started in my late teens when I realized I was losing weight rapidly and couldn't gain it back. I was eating 4,000 calories a day, but it all went through me without any noticeable change. At first, everyone told me it was just a young metabolism, but by the time I hit 26, it was clear something was wrong. I started developing other concerning symptoms and decided to get health insurance so I could finally see a doctor. Doctors felt the lumps in my throat and sent me for imaging. I waited over a month, constantly calling to get my results. Eventually, I got the scans and brought them to my GP, who referred me to a major hospital for an ultrasound and biopsy. At the hospital, they numbed me, prepped me, and then asked if I'd had any previous scans. I told them I had, but apparently there was no record of them. They went ahead with the biopsy and I paid the $200 copay. Then nothing. For 2 months, I waited for someone to call me, but no one did. I called repeatedly to get my records, only to be told it was illegal for me to access them as an outpatient. An absurd claim. After multiple attempts, I finally got a copy. But when I asked for someone to explain the results to me, I was told they only perform procedures, not consultations. The report included a line that mentioned presence of non-Hodgkin cells, likely but undetermined. I didn't fully understand what it meant, and by then, COVID had hit. To make matters worse, I received a $3,200 bill for the biopsy because my insurance retroactively denied the claim. Without the ability to pay the bill, I was barred from enrolling in new health insurance. Now I'm 5 feet 8 inches and down to 119 pounds, barely holding on to any muscle from when I was fit. I'm scared that if I do have cancer, it's too late, but asking for help isn't an option. My mom recently came back into my life after a falling out, but she's quick to remind me that I'll never be financially stable if I rely on her. I don't want to burden her or my girlfriend, and I feel trapped. Part of me is terrified to face the truth, and part of me is afraid of the cost, both financially and emotionally, of trying to find out. Story 18. When I was 9 years old, I came very close to killing myself. I had everything planned out. I would wait until late at night, when my parents and siblings were deep asleep, and use the razor blades I knew were under the bathroom sink. I had researched where to cut to hit major arteries so I could bleed out quickly. I convinced myself that no one would miss me and that they'd move on soon enough. The only thing that stopped me was learning that my oldest sister was pregnant. She was several months along, and the thought of my niece never knowing me beyond secondhand stories kept me from going through with it. I couldn't shake the idea that I wanted to be there for her, even if I couldn't see much value in myself. To this day, I still have suicidal thoughts. They're intrusive, constant whispers in the back of my mind, pointing out how I could use whatever is around me to end it. I don't think I'll ever stop being hyper-aware of those possibilities, but somehow I made it to 19 years old. No one knows about what I've been through, and I'll probably take these thoughts to my grave. I'm effectively low contact with my parents and 2 of my siblings. I don't know how anyone would react if I told them, and I'm not sure I ever want to find out. Story 19. I'm 25, and I used to be married. My ex-wife suffers from borderline personality disorder, BPD, and developed a coca addiction toward the end of our relationship. I drove her to rehab and did everything I could to support her. She believes I left her and moved away because I gave up on her, and maybe that's true in some ways. But what really happened was that I found out about her boyfriend. I confronted him, and the bastard laughed in my face. When I confronted her, it was obvious she didn't care how I felt. It turns out they'd been seeing each other since month 3 of our nearly 3-year relationship. I should have realized it sooner, but love made me blind and stupid. Finding out broke me. I spiraled into a dark place. One night, I found out where he was staying, and in a frenzy, I drove there. But when I arrived, I realized he had recently moved. I sat in my car, overwhelmed by rage and hurt, and let out a primal scream I didn't even know I was capable of. It was terrifying to feel so out of control. A month later, I moved back in with my dad. That small town held too many people who had disrespected me in various ways. If I didn't leave, I was convinced I was going to do something I'd regret. I'm ashamed of how little self-control I had, but I wish I'd just walked away much earlier. There were so many signs that she didn't care for me the way I cared for her. Maybe she did love me at some point. We were even going to have a baby together. But now I think I was more of a convenience to her than anything else. Last I heard, she's experimenting with meth alongside my cousin, who's providing her with drugs and covering for her when she's out with the same guy. It's hard to accept how things turned out, but at least I'm out of that mess now. Story 20. Sometimes I space out so hard it feels like I'm losing my mind. It's not a quick, just thinking for a few seconds kind of thing. It's like I completely dissociate. I'll have conversations I can't recall, and sometimes I'll say things that don't even reflect what I believe or care about. For example, someone once asked me about my career aspirations, and I said, I've always been fascinated by nutrition and treating conditions through diet. That's not true at all, but I only realized what I'd said after the fact. Sometimes when I snap back, it feels like I've just woken up and been handed a file with a quick summary of why I'm there and what I was talking about. Other times, I don't have that instant clarity and panic for a few seconds, trying to piece together what's going on. It's becoming more frequent, and it's starting to scare me. A recent example was during a job interview. I remember walking into the building, and the next thing I knew, I was walking out, realizing I'd done well in the interview. It was disorienting, but also a relief. I'd been so anxious about it, and somehow I managed to perform without even consciously experiencing it. The scariest part is when I come home, and for a moment, it feels like my house isn't mine, like I'm walking into someone else's space. It's deeply unsettling. Thankfully, I've never done anything violent or harmful during these episodes, so I just chalk it up to being forgetful and try to move on. I play off my memory lapses as part of being the dumb friend in my group, but deep down, I'm worried something bigger might be wrong. For now, I just keep going and hope it doesn't get worse. Story 21. Before I was married, my fiance and I were separated by thousands of miles because I was stationed on the other side of the country. We were engaged and had set a date to get married. She had past relationships and school experiences before we met, but I hadn't. At my duty station, I befriended a guy in my unit who shared my passion for cars. We spent a lot of time together going to car shows, drag races, and working on our cars. His wife was also into cars and would join us often. She worked on her own vehicles, participated in drag races, and was generally one of the guys. She was funny, engaging, and incredibly likable. Her personality drew me in. The three of us hung out often, but one day after my night shift, I stopped by their house to pick up a part. She challenged me to arm wrestle, weird, I know, and I let her win. She then claimed she could beat me at wrestling, a pastime my friend and I often engaged in. So we wrestled. At first I took it easy because, well, chivalry. But she was surprisingly strong, and I had to step it up. She eventually pinned me down on the couch. At that moment, I should have stopped everything, but I didn't. She grabbed my tongue with her mouth, and before I knew it, one thing led to another. We crossed a line I never thought I would. Afterward, I drove to the beach, feeling overwhelmed by shame and regret. I had betrayed my best friend, my fiancé, and myself. It didn't stop there. We continued the affair for a couple of months until I left to get married. We agreed it was fun, but that it had to end. I've never told anyone about this because it would only hurt others. I chose to carry the burden of regret alone. Now, I've been married for 30 years and am happy. She's still married to my former best friend, though we lost touch when I was re-aimed. It's a chapter of my life I deeply regret, but I've done my best to move forward. Story 22. After I got married, I discovered that my husband was gay, or at the very least bisexual, and had been hiding it from me. During our relationship, he cheated on me with my gay best friend at the time. I have no issue with people being gay or bi, but I do have a problem with someone pledging their life to me while hiding a fundamental part of themselves. By the time I found out, we had 2 children, which only made the betrayal more painful. We're still married, but we resent each other for various reasons. He's a narcissist, and we haven't had us in over 8 years, since our youngest was conceived. He doesn't know I'm aware of his past, but it eats away at me. We're essentially living separate lives now, sharing a house as co-parents and trying to raise our kids, and now a grandchild. We're both closet alcoholics, stuck in this situation because I can't afford to move out and take my kids with me. I've thought about ending it all many times, but my kids are the reason I keep going. They are the only thing that keeps me alive and fighting every day. Despite the toxic environment, I'm doing my best to be a good parent and provide for my family. My job is demanding, and no matter how hard I work, my husband constantly accuses me of not contributing enough. It's exhausting and demoralizing to never feel like I'm good enough in his eyes. I refuse to give up, though. Someday, I hope to feel appreciated and worthy of love. Until then, I'll keep fighting this battle for my kids. They deserve better, and I won't let them down. Story 23. This is a double secret. When I lived in the Midwest for work, I met a gorgeous woman, fit, athletic, and confident. We were both in our early 20s, and she happened to notice me during my heaviest workout day at the gym. She complimented my workout routine, but honestly, I struggled to focus with her being so distracting. Later that day, we ran into each other again after her run, and she invited me over to the apartment she was staying in for a beer. She was only in town for a month, apartment sitting for a former school friend who was overseas for work. Things quickly got hot and heavy between us. That month was one of the most intense and passionate experiences I'd ever had. She was from out west, and when the month ended, we both agreed it was better to leave things as a great memory. Neither of us wanted a long-distance relationship while being focused on our careers. And the 1,800 miles between us made the decision easier. A year later, I attended a family funeral for my dad's oldest sister. To my shock, there she was, the hard-body girl I had been with. We both freaked out inside but managed to keep our composure in front of everyone. When we finally got a chance to talk privately, we pieced everything together. It turned out my dad had a younger sister who had left home after high school with a guy. For years, the family didn't know where she went. She moved west, married, and got pregnant right around the same time my mom was pregnant with me. The woman I had spent that month with was my first cousin, someone I'd never met or even known existed. Imagine if we had told anyone about our time together, how we'd slept together as often as possible, day after day. It's a relief we never shared that story. No one in the family knows, and no one ever will. Story 24. I've disclosed to a few close people that I have dysthymia, persistent depressive disorder, and PTSD along with ADHD and generalized anxiety disorder. Dysthymia means I deal with depressive episodes that can last for years, with only brief periods of relief in between if I'm lucky. But even when I'm not in a full episode, the symptoms linger. I've learned not to talk too much about it. People don't understand, and they don't want to. They see you as negative, a buzzkill, or just someone to avoid. So, I mask it. Medication takes the edge off but doesn't eliminate the symptoms. I rely on caffeine to combat the constant fatigue, though as someone with ADHD, it takes absurd amounts for it to have any effect. Sometimes anxiety temporarily counteracts the fatigue, but it always leads to an even harder crash. In 2021, I was starting to come out of a long episode. For the first time in years, it felt like my life was getting better. Then, my dog died suddenly and traumatically. It plunged me right back into that pit. I don't talk about how hard it is to get out of bed, how exhausted I am no matter how much I sleep, or how deep the despair runs. I don't tell anyone how worthless and unlovable I feel, or how I've lost the ability to enjoy things that used to bring me joy. Most days, I feel like a hollow shell of the person I used to be, constantly questioning if the people in my life would be better off if I didn't exist. I mask everything because I know how people react. They don't care to understand. They attribute depression to poor choices and character flaws. If I were honest, I'd be written off by friends and colleagues. I'd likely lose my job, and my therapist might even consider institutionalization. So, I keep it hidden. I endure it quietly, trying not to make others uncomfortable, even as it slowly hollows me out. It's a lonely and exhausting existence, but I don't see any other way forward. Story 25. I used to be an alcoholic, partly due to undiagnosed ADHD and autism. I drank every day until I was blackout drunk or close to it. One night, I was taken advantage of while blacked out. I woke up naked in someone else's car, a coworker, and realized I was being raped. In my confusion and fear, I tried to convince myself that I had asked for it. I blacked out again and found myself back home. Eventually, I convinced myself that I had willingly cheated on my long-term boyfriend. The guilt was unbearable, and instead of confronting the truth, I formed a secret relationship with this man. I thought that by pretending it was consensual, the pain, confusion, and shame would go away. Every time I was blackout drunk, this sober, older man would take advantage of me. He manipulated me into believing it was my fault and blackmailed me whenever I tried to end it. Eventually, I realized what was really happening. It was rape and manipulation. Despite his threats, I ended it for good. He left the job, and I haven't seen or heard from him since. It took me 2 years to fully acknowledge what had happened. My autism and naivete made it difficult for me to process situations as they occurred, and I often only understood them long after the fact. I've never told my husband, then boyfriend, about what happened. I'm ashamed I didn't know better and scared he might seek revenge or blame himself for not protecting me. It's been nearly a decade, but the pain still feels fresh. That man haunts me in my dreams, and I still struggle with the shame and trauma. On the positive side, I stopped binge drinking because of what happened. I'm more self-aware and have better self-control, though I still battle addiction issues. Last year, I was finally diagnosed with autism and ADHD, which has helped me make sense of why I process and react to things differently. I recently looked this man up on Facebook and saw he's now with a 22-year-old woman, the same age I was when he took advantage of me. I hope she's not trapped in the same kind of manipulation I endured, and I pray his daughter never experiences what he's done to others. Story 26. I'm on my third marriage and it's been a disaster. My wife and I had a rocky relationship from the start. 4 months into dating, she needed emergency surgery for uterine cancer, and I supported her through it. She had 2 kids at the time, a 17-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old son. After helping her through her cancer, we broke up and reconnected several times. At one point, she asked me to take a more active role in her daughter's life because the father was ignoring her. I even taught the daughter how to drive. In January, the daughter turned 18, and by March, my girlfriend and I broke up again. One of the reasons was that her daughter openly asked me to start a relationship with her, even while I was still dating her mother. After that, I cut ties with both of them, telling them to stay out of my life. Months later, they reached out, saying they lost their health insurance and needed help with appliances and other expenses. Together, they proposed a deal. The daughter would be my girlfriend, and the ex-girlfriend would be my wife if I took care of them financially. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We got married in April of last year. From the moment I married her, my life fell apart. I've never done anything sexual with the daughter. We tried once, but I couldn't go through with it, and since then, we've been just friends. Now she drives around in an $80,000 truck I bought her, while her mom has a new truck I also paid for. My downtown condo is rented out for less than the mortgage, and I've been financially drained. I've endured physical and mental abuse from both of them. On top of that, I recently had major surgery that cost me my $160,000 a year job. My wife has gained over 110 pounds in just 14 months, while I'm barely scraping by on disability. Every day feels like being trapped in a pit with a family of grizzly bears. I don't love either of them. I never did. But if I don't say I love you daily, my life becomes even more unbearable. I feel completely trapped. I've lost everything trying to help them, and I see no way out. Most days I wish for a lightning strike to take me out. I'm not even sure who I am anymore. I just know I'm deeply unhappy and don't know how to fix it. Story 27. My brother and I are trapped in what feels like an eternal loop, repeating the same struggle over and over through time. He invents time travel in the 2050s or 2080 to stop me, and I end up destroying the world as we know it. This leads me to go back in time to condition my younger self into becoming the destroyer of worlds, perpetuating the cycle. This time around, the loop has included strange permutations I don't recall from previous cycles. For example, when I was 6 or 7, the devil's daughter approached me and took me on a spirit journey to hell to meet her father. I also encountered the ghost of my future self, learned my dad has ancestral memories of a planet humans migrated from, and discovered my mom claims to be the love child of JFK and Marilyn Monroe. In the late 90s, 2 friends gave me a red pill/blue pill choice, insisting I take the red pill without explaining why. When I pressed them, they mentioned concepts like clone farms and AI simulations. Then they gave me the blue pill and vanished in front of me. When The Matrix came out a few years later, I was deeply unsettled. In 2004, I embarked on a road trip spirit quest up and down the East Coast, trying to find a way into Midworld or Endworld to save the Dark Tower. At one point, I had the chance to die in a car wreck, which I believed would allow me to escape to another universe, but I chickened out. After returning home and reading the Dark Tower Book 7, I started having vivid dreams, including resetting a switch and waking up in excruciating agony, being surrounded by dark entities in a black void, hearing their static-like voices but unable to see them, having a nightmare in which Walter O'Sullivan from Silent Hill 4 trapped me in a dream loop, and I had to fight with all my will to wake up, wandering through a surreal house only to encounter Leonard Nimoy, in his prime, who insulted Ann Coulter, leading to a bizarre argument with my dad, ending up in a cabin where Otis Firefly from House of 1,000 Corpses presented me with a gagged and bound child, like a twisted gift. Despite knowing how implausible most of these experiences are, they feel as real as any other memory. Delusional madness runs in my family, so I question my grip on reality. My dad's rare neurological condition and experimental medications may have also contributed to how I perceive things. On top of these extraordinary and bizarre memories, there are mundane but dangerous secrets I carry. For example, things my dad told me about his time in the Navy. Things that, if revealed, could cause a lot of trouble. My fragile grasp on reality, combined with these hidden truths, feels like a constant weight. Story 28. I've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, but I know there's something more going on. I've been married for 10 years and have children, but some days I despise my wife and my life so deeply that I think about ending it all just to escape the stress and anger. My youngest child is 3, and my kids are the only thing keeping me anchored. My wife hasn't done anything wrong. Most of the time, I know it's me and my mental state, but I can't stop the negative thoughts. Small things like her asking too many questions or bringing up something stressful send me spiraling into dark, critical thoughts. I never think about harming her, but I call her stupid in my head and harshly critique everything she does. It's destroying me inside. There are times when I feel extreme happiness with my family, and I don't understand what shifts in me to cause these mood swings. I feel like I need to retreat under a rock for a year, away from everything, but I can't because my family needs me. They deserve better than the person I am now. I talked to a VA psychiatrist, but I'm afraid to fully open up about the severity of my thoughts because of my marijuana use. He prescribes me antidepressants, but they don't seem to help. Marijuana is the only thing that clears my head and prevents me from falling into that dark place. I use it before family vacations and road trips to ensure I don't ruin those experiences for them. At the end of the day, I feel like my children are the only reason I keep going. They give me purpose, even when I feel like I don't deserve it. I want to be better for them, and I'll keep fighting to give them a good life, even if I don't believe I'm good enough. Story 29. I've been chronically ill for most of my life. For the past 18 years, I've been on treatment for a rare autoimmune disease that left me disabled and forced me to quit the one thing I loved: teaching. I've been on weekly chemotherapy and daily prednisone for all those years, without a single break. I'd imagine I've endured more chemo than most cancer patients by now, and I'm sick every single day. Living with chronic illness is isolating. When you're unable to keep up with plans or have to cancel often, people stop including you. Even if they do, you often can't participate fully, if at all. Over time, friends drift away, and even some family does too. I'm not bitter. I understand that life moves on for them. I genuinely love seeing the families they've built and the lives they've created. But chronic illness is a lonely life, especially when you don't create a family of your own. I chose not to have children. I didn't think I was worth anything being so sick, and I didn't want to paw on my disease. I wouldn't wish this life on my worst enemy. I've shared parts of this with people before, but I've never told anyone my deepest truth. I'm ready to go. I've tried to make a difference in the world. I taught, and later, I led a large support group for people with my disease. I've even saved lives. But the only person I have left is my 80-year-old mom. We've been each other's support system for so long, and now I pray that I go before her. It sounds cowardly, but I'm just so tired. I've lost so much. I've lived without fulfilling my dreams, and I'm only existing now. I want peace. I want to rest. I want to die.